Welcome back. This is episode 214. This week I'm joined by a special guest, Raquel Fernandez. Raquel is a realtor with over 20 years experience in New York State and Long Island. She's also licensed in Connecticut, and she's really here to talk about the National Association of REALTORS settlement that you might have heard about and some major changes that are going to be going into effect in the middle of August. Welcome, Raquel.
Oh, thank you for having me. Good morning.
Morning.
That's a lot of podcasts. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, there's obviously some big changes. There was a lawsuit that was going on for, I guess, a number of years that finally settled, I guess you could say, and now there's some changes to the real estate market that are going to be going into play.
Yeah. So this basically in March 15th, NARS was found guilty by a jury for an antitrust lawsuit that was brought against NARS and the real estate market as a whole. And they were awarded $1.78 billion in damages. So you could imagine, how upsetting and, how this shook up the market. So they quickly went into negotiations to try to settle with this lawsuit. So they reached a settlement. Basically, in April, they had announced that they had reached a settlement of $418 million, much better than the original.
Yeah.
And so they went back and forth where they weren't sure if they were in agreement. And we just got word that this is to go into effect on the 17th of August, and all parties have agreed. So the settlement was agreed upon for $418 million. It's to be paid over 4 years. So our dues are going to go up across the board. Yeah. And basically, 4 big brokerages were the ones that came into that settlement, which basically own most of the market share in New York State. And there were some brokerages that didn't come in to the fold at this time. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out as well. So that's kind of the update on, what transpired with that.
Sure. So I think as part of this, from what I was reading, is there's some changes, like if you're going to be, selling your house after, was it August 17th, right? There could be changes to how that transaction would proceed. What are those?
Right. So basically, it is going to affect the way that we transacted business as usual. In the past, we would go to our platform, which is an MLS, and each, county or borough has their own MLS. We happen to be part of the One Key in Long Island. And on there, when I would go to show a buyer a property, it would show me the compensation that I, the buyer broker, would be expected to get paid at the closing. So I do my research, I pull up 3 properties, I see that they're paying 2%, and I make my appointment with my buyer. I take them on the tour of the properties that I've, secured what my compensation is going to be.
Sure.
And once we basically come to an agreement and have a deal, it's expected that I get compensated at the closing, that 2%.
Sure.
Well, in this settlement, it is no longer allowed. It is against the law for any compensation given to the borrower to the buyer broker to be put in that format or in that platform. No longer can you advertise the compensation in our basically platform that we all worked from. So now it's just going to change the dynamic of how we go about, putting together a buyer tour. Additionally to that, what also has transpired is that going forward, you cannot meet someone as a, buyer without a buyer broker agreement in place. This is now the law.
Okay.
So that's a big deal, right? Because people would call for Zillow, hi, Century 21, yes, I'd like to see this house in 22 Pleasantville. Can you show it to me? Sure. It's tomorrow at 4:00. Good for you. Sure. Tomorrow at 4:00 is good. And we would meet up. Now we would meet up, but prior to me giving that buyer the tour, I'd have to present him with a contract explaining to him that he is responsible to compensate me.
Okay.
So there's going to be a huge shift in the market because there's going to have to be a lot of education around that, right? There's going to be, people that are going to say, what are you talking about? I have to compensate you. This has always been that the seller pays. I'm not signing
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
So your value proposition is going to be huge, right? So it's really going to change things up. And I would say this is the biggest change up that has happened in our industry since I've been doing this for
Yeah.
20 plus years. Yeah.
So let's take a step back. So let's say you're the typical seller, right? In the past, you'd interview agents, and you might choose an agent maybe by what they're willing to sell your house for, because I guess the maximum, I'm not sure, but was it 6%?
Correct.
So then some realtors would do it for 5, maybe some would do it for 4. So
Correct.
then you hire somebody, but normally as the seller, you're compensating both the seller, your broker, and if another broker would bring that client to the table, right, to buy your house. So that would be coming out of your sales price.
Correct. And so you kind of already, plan for that within that selling price strategy.
Sure.
So if you know that you are going to pay 4% on a $500,000 house, you've already, deducted that. And this is what you're comfortable saying, I need to net this. This covers the commissions. We're good.
Sure.
And that's typically, around their kitchen table, the conversations that we would have and go back and forth and make sure we understood like what they needed to walk away with after the transaction closing.
Sure. Yeah. So that would be factored in. And then I guess part of what the lawsuit found is that if, let's say, you had decided to only pay 4, right, 2 to each broker or each agent, and now someone else is paying 5, that maybe if you're the buyer's agent, you wouldn't show them the property that was only going to pay you 2 if you had another property that was going to pay you 2.5 or 3, right? That's what.
So you've read up, huh?
What's
yeah.
that?
So I said, so you've read up on it.
Well, no, yeah.
So yeah. So basically, the whole lawsuit is based on that. They're saying that we violated antitrust laws by having that ability to do that on the platform. So, I'll take it back a step. If someone called me and said, I want to see ABC property, and I looked it up and it said it's only paying, in my market, it's usually 1.5%, you'll see, because it starts off here at 4%. That's
Okay.
like the norm.
Sure.
And then, some agents will be discount agents and they'll take the listing for 3.
Okay.
And then they'll advertise 1.5 to the other side. So I would see that, and yeah, I'm not happy about it, right? Because
Yeah,
I know that
you're
the
making
house
less,
next
yeah.
door is 2%, but I certainly would show them the property
Yeah.
and do everything accordingly. But the whole theory behind this is that if the client called me and said, I want to see properties in Port Jefferson, and I now am going through my platform, I'm going to pull out the properties that are convenient for me that have the higher paying commission.
Sure.
So maybe that property that was 1.5% was the perfect property for that buyer. But now they don't have the ability to see it because I've kind of hid it from them. So, in
Theoretically,
theory,
yes.
it's true. It's such a, small thing that I really, and I mean, a lot of my peers can't really wrap their head around why such a big change based on something of this magnitude being so minute. However, it is what it is because clearly industries need regulating, and it's been a long time since we've been regulated. And this is the thing that, kind of created these conversations and now led to this. So
that's right.
Whatever.
So, all right. So now let's say a couple things about this, we'll just focus on sellers for a minute, then we'll move over to buyers. So if you had an existing contract that was in place before August 17th, then that stays in place, right?
Correct.
Okay.
However, after August 17th, we are no longer able to advertise the cooperating broker commission on MLS.
Oh, okay.
So now they've had to rehaul their entire platform because we no longer can go in there and put that compensation, right? So we just got, which is crazy because this has all been done so quickly. I've been, with my team training on this for a year, and Century 21 is an amazing platform, and they really got in front of this. So they've been working on this behind the scenes for a year and a half. So they've been giving us, information and kind of preparing us for what was to come. However, our MLS really seemed to be behind the eight ball because literally the information came out Monday with the new forms that now we will use with our sellers.
Okay.
And this is going to happen
window.
in
yeah. We're recording this on August 7th, so they gave you 10 days.
I'm like, wow. So now going forward, basically there is no longer a spot that you can promote what the commission is going to be. Now, having said that, am I able to, one of the things we did with our team was really dismiss a lot of fake news, right? There was so much miscommunication out. You were reading these articles and one said one thing and one said, they're no longer going to be able to pay commissions. All of this was not true. And basically it was really important to educate and inform the consumers of what was. And so the seller needs to understand that he will still be able to compensate us. It just won't be via that vehicle. But what's going to happen? So now all of a sudden after August 17th, I get a buyer who calls me, right? Hey, Rachel, my daughter's looking for a house, thought of you. Can you take her out Saturday? Absolutely. Where's she looking? Oh, she's looking in this area, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, what have you. There's the budget. Now I'm going to go do my regular, work that I do. And I go into the platform. I'm going to pull up the 6 best properties that I can show her.
Sure.
And now I'm going to call the other agent on the phone, which if you think about it, Ryan, it's really bringing value proposition is what you should have been doing already, right? Because if I'm going to go tour properties, I should be on the phone with that agent, getting the information about the property, room, square footage, permits, different things that we do to try to prepare to do a tour and have the right information for our buyers. So now the agents that didn't do that because they were quick and just showed up and just kind of, did it by the side of their pants or whatever that phrase is.
Seat of their pants.
Seat of their pants will not be successful because you will have to have called those agents and had a conversation and asked, is your seller offering broker compensation? Oh, yeah, Rachel, they are. It's 2%. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Any other information I should know about the property? Oh, there's a CO for this or not for that, and you get your information. So you do that down the line on the properties you're going to show. Now, when you go out with your buyer, you're able to not have the fear that you're not going to be compensated because you've already had this conversation, right? So that's wonderful. Now you sat with the buyer, which we'll get into later, and you present that in a certain way. Let's say a seller is not going to offer compensation to the broker for whatever reason. They decided they've heard about this, which is a big battle that we are as a group and as an industry are going to have to fight and explain to the sellers that it would be a detriment to them to basically, shut off all these other agents because they think they're going to save a couple dollars.
Wow.
So as brokerages, we have, but really, you want to get the top for your property, the quickest, and you want the best, brokers on it so that you have an easy, smooth transaction.
Sure.
You're not going to do that if you take a stance that you're only going to limit yourself to paying your listing broker their commission. I'm going to save the other two.
Yeah.
And that basically is going to shrink the pool of, eyeballs on my property because I will now not have the ability to market this to all the, 15,000 agents in New York, right? It's not going to happen because now I've just cut it down to 5,000 agents that I'm able to work with if I work for a big firm. So maybe I'm able to, if it's a Century 21, I can advertise it across, my Century 21s. But if I'm not working for a big firm, that even gets smaller and smaller. So really the sellers would be shooting themselves in the foot by, thinking that way. And it's important that we band together as a market and as an industry and educate the sellers. And that's a lot of the conversations that we're having, my peers and I, and a lot of the different companies.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting because we're currently in a period where there's the lowest inventory there's ever been, right, historically. So it's been a good time, for a while to
Yeah,
be a seller. So I'm
yeah.
sure there's going to be some sellers that are going to experiment with that.
A
Um,
hundred.
and
We're
you
already
know,
seeing it.
and say, you know what, I'm only going to pay my selling agent. I'm not going to pay the buyer's broker, and let's see what happens. Because if it's $1 million house, right, and they save $20,000, it's a lot of money. So I guess we'll have to see what happens, and the market will probably dictate too. In a worse market where you're not getting enough buyers and there's more inventory, you probably will be crazy to do that.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true. And that's exactly what's happened. And something interesting you just said, and you hit it on the nose, is that we're going to have the challenges with the bigger listings, right?
Yeah.
So the smaller listings, not so much. You're dealing with people that really, really, really need you because maybe this will be their first transaction that they've sold or what have you. So your expertise is really going to be important. And you probably will be able to advise them, and they're probably going to adhere to your advisement. As you get into these bigger, transactions, you're dealing with sellers that are more savvy, that are probably used to being in the market, or have exchanged multiple properties throughout their, time. So they're going to be the ones that we're going to have to, really express our value and how important it is to not go that route because, again, it's about getting the most eyeballs at the quickest amount of time to your property, getting a deal, and getting it off the books. That's the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's always right. That's the number I've heard is like, how long's it been on the market, right? Days on the market. Like, as that number like ticks higher, it gets harder and harder usually to sell a property, right? Because then people think there's something wrong with it. Like, this
A
thing's been on the
hundred
market
percent.
100
Yep.
days. Why isn't it
Yep.
sold?
There's an unknown. And
Yeah.
that's what we have to be very passionate, and we have to also be very prepared to go to the sellers and express that, right? Because we already are seeing it as I'm talking to my peers in different companies. We're already seeing the CEO of EXP, which is a huge company that came on the market. Probably it's a new company 10 years ago. You've heard of them, right?
Yeah.
They just made a huge statement that their CEO is going to be advising all their sellers to not pay
Oh,
broker
wow.
compensation.
Okay.
That was on the real deal. I couldn't believe I was reading that. I was like, this is really interesting. I actually have a call out to one of the vice presidents that's a friend of mine in EXP to just kind of pick his brain on that one because I'm just taken back that he's taking that stance. But I do believe, like you said, because we are in a market of low inventory, it's a strategy that EXP is putting out
Sure.
there where now their agents will be, having this new thing that they're going to offer and potentially gather up more inventory and get more business. But I think that can really backfire because it's going to leave a bad taste. It's already leaving a bad taste on a lot of the brokerages and the people they have to work with because it's like, what are you talking about? So again, so many unknowns, Ryan. And after August 17th, I'm going to be logging in and seeing how EXP is going to handle that when I call for
Sure.
one of their
Yeah.
listings, you know?
So, all right, let's just talk about. It seems kind of crazy, right? We're going backwards. Like you have a system that has all this information, and they've said no, you can't put it on there. You got to
That's
call.
it.
You got to,
Yep.
phone a friend here and find out that information. So, let's just focus on the buyer for a minute, okay? Let's say you bring a buyer, and you have 5 properties you're going to show them, but 2 of them are properties that don't pay buyer's agent commissions. Okay. So how would that work? Does that mean the buyer has to pay their agent the 2% or 1.5 or 3, whatever
So
it is?
there's multiple ways that can how we can be compensated, right? So one of the other things that did come out of the lawsuit that is okay with NARS is that the seller can offer a seller's concession. So I know this
Okay.
is a little cray cray,
Sounds
but
like a
follow
commission.
me, follow me. So now, again, just Monday, MLS, which is our, platform, said we changed the field and you can put in there up to how much the sellers are willing to allow you to, put as a concession. So now I go speak to my seller and I say, look, you want 500, that's what I want, but I'm willing to let them get a concession of 2%, that's 510. So as long as if they come in at 510 and I net 5, we're good. So this is going to be very interesting, Ryan, because everything that I'm seeing is that it's 2%, right? So it's like, that's the commission. And if we go back, the commissions always come out of the transaction.
Sure.
It always comes out of the transaction. However you put it, it just comes out of the transaction. So anyway, that's more to be seen on that. But there's three ways. First, you have to schedule, what we're doing as a company and as a, policy is scheduling a buyer consultation. Like I was telling you earlier, this isn't going to be, I'm going to meet you at the property and you're going to sign, my forms on the top of, the hood of my car anymore. It's just not going to happen. So we do expect to see a huge edit in the market because a lot of those agents that are not able to have prepared for this and really have their value proposition down are going to struggle. And it's sad, but it's also good because every industry needs an edit here and there, right? So it's going to have the better agents rise to the top, and it's going to have the agents that are not performing kind of disappear from the market. So we are to schedule a consultation. This could be a Zoom call, 15,
Sure.
20 minutes prior to the event or the night before. At this point, we expect that you have a presentation talking about what you bring to the table as a brand and what value you bring to this buyer by hiring you. Your company's value proposition, we pitch value, transparency, and how we have to get this buyer broker agreement signed prior to showing them the property because it's the new law. It's not us, it's the law. So I can't show you the property if you don't sign this for me.
Definitely. So it sounds like every buyer is going to need to sign this because you'd be crazy as an agent to go out there and show properties knowing that you could literally not make anything
sued.
If they close on a deal.
And they have said that they're going to put, listen, with $419 million over 4 years, you better believe there's going to be a huge committee of spotters and people that are going to be out on the market testing this for compliance. So you'd be out of your mind to do it because you'd be in risking your license and huge fines. So it's really important. So now, once you've met the buyer and you've gone over your value proposition, right, it's going to be much easier to have them sign this and not say, hey, here, you have to really have had that conversation with them, explain to them what services you offer, why they should hire you. Then there's 3 different ways they can compensate you, right? The 3 ways they can compensate you is first, Mr. Buyer, you are not to worry about it because I've actually called on these 3 properties and I know already that the seller is offering compensation.
Sure.
So basically, it is coming from him, and when we basically write up the offer, that is how it will look on the contract, kind of like normal. So there's no issue. I've already done my due diligence. Number 2, Mr. Buyer, if the seller doesn't, for whatever reason, want to pay us, we can use it as a concession. So it will basically come out of the deal. If you are comfortable with, this number, we will work together to make sure that we come in and we negotiate for you so that at the end of the day, you are going to be within the number you were comfortable, and that will cover our commission via a concession, the 2%.
Yeah.
And then number 3, if those 2 don't work, and ultimately we get to the table and the seller says, I'm not offering compensation and I'm not offering a concession, then you would have to buy me.
You'd have to pay.
You would have. I'm sorry. Yeah. You would have to pay me the. You'd have to buy me. You would have to pay me the 2%, and this would be out of your pocket. Now, let me explain to you the 179 ways why you should absolutely want me.
A big change. So let's just say like the seller is not going to give a concession. They're not going to pay the normal commission, and someone has to pay, their buyer's agent the 2%. are they having to, is that like part of a down payment? They have to pay that out of pocket, or can that be like rolled into the transaction? Like they're going to borrow that 2% or?
So it would be at closing,
Okay.
and it would be not rolled into the transaction, because for it to be rolled into the transaction, it would be rolled in as a
Oh,
concession.
okay.
And
Yeah,
if the seller has said no, then that's not an option.
sure.
And one of the reasons, Ryan, that the seller can say no to that would be, we are in a extraordinary high time in value,
Sure.
right? So the sellers want the most in their pocket,
Yeah.
and they're pushing those limits, right,
Yeah.
with the appraisal. So they might not be comfortable and say, this house is not going to appraise for 510. No, I'm not going to offer that, because I don't want a deal to be 3/4 into the making, and then the house not to appraise, and then us be, in a, uncertain situation. So that's one of the reasons why they might not offer concession.
Yeah, that makes sense because it's getting added to the purchase price. Yeah, I had a deal years ago. I was pretty much done, and they wouldn't agree to a small concession for closing costs. It
They
fell
were probably,
apart. So,
they
and
were probably
they didn't even
concerned
let
that
it
you
go
would.
to appraisal. They after some time they just walked away.
Interesting.
So I mean, I guess the best route would be it's business as usual. The seller is willing to pay the usual commission. That's going to be the best route because that's the cleanest way. The price is the price. It gets netted out of what they get, and everybody's happy. But
A
if they
hundred
don't,
percent.
then you got option number two. Maybe they're willing to do a concession, but that might not work. Like you said, if let's say they're willing to pay 500, but now that's got to be 510, and the appraiser says no, the house isn't worth 510. It's worth 495. Well, that's going to be a problem.
Correct.
Yeah. And then the third
And,
way, they actually have to pay for it. So
but again,
yeah,
it's about conveying value to the buyer. It's always going to come out of the transaction. At the end of the day, if you are able to articulate your value to this buyer and explain to them in all the ways that you're going to bring value to this transaction, particularly for them, because again, most buyers, this is their first transaction,
sure.
biggest, purchase that they'll make in their life, right? In a person's average life is usually two. This is their first transaction. So, you're going to negotiate for them in ways that they don't even know about. You're going to, be seeing every step of the way with the appraisal, the contracts, the inspections. And one of the things that we talk about, and I tell my team, you're over here dying because you've talked to the attorney 17 times and the deal's about to, it's literally, we have like resuscitate the deal because of different things going on. The house didn't appraise, or there's an issue with a permit. And all of a sudden, you're dealing this for a week. Your buyer call, oh, everything's great. Yeah, great. Yeah, the deal's moving right along. Yeah, it looks like we're going to close early. No. Let them know. Let them know everything that's going on. Partner with them,
Yeah.
because we make it look way too easy, and we are, we don't want to stress them out. And now it's really involving them and letting them understand the value that you brought to the transaction through all of this. So that's one of the things I'm educating my team is like, you want to make them your partners. And also, Brian, one of the big things that we're pushing is transparency, right? So people didn't understand how we got paid. It was like, for years, what? How? Like, it just was like a
Yeah.
mystery. The buyers didn't care because at
Yeah,
the end
they
of the
didn't have to
day,
pay
you're
for it.
working
Yeah.
for them. They don't have to pay for it. But no, be transparent. You're going to let them know. This is it. This is what I work for, 2%. This is not regulated. This is something that is negotiable. But like, for example, in my office, and their form says that, it's called the buyer broker form that we've come out with as a company, mirroring the state one that they put out. And it talks about how that compensation is negotiable and not set by the state. Because
Sure.
I guess that's another thing that they were trying to make it, that if you were selling that you were getting 3%, that it was state mandatory. No, this is
Oh, yeah.
negotiable. But in our
Yeah.
office, 2% is the standard, and explain to them, what they're going to get for that. And I think the good agents will be fine.
Yeah. No, I'm sure. I think, most people are going to agree they want an agent. But it's just a difficult part. If it is a first-time home purchase, right, and let's say you're planning to put 10% down or 20%, and now you need another 2% saved up, because if you're going to have to pay it, you really need to have it, because you can't just always assume, oh, it's going to be a concession or it's going to be the seller's going to kick it in. That's the tough part.
So at the end of the day, the agents are going to have to really do their job, a little better. They're going to work a little harder. And because what that means to me is that I'm going to have to really understand my client's budget, move forward with the house and not be financially, drowning. So you're just going to have to dig a little deeper.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, for the buyer. And it's a change because it's not the norm.
No, it's not. Yeah, and it's certainly not at a good time either when the real estate market is really been struggling as far as, like I said at the beginning of the show, low inventory, right? It's a seller's market.
But things are changing, Brian.
Yeah.
Things are creeping up. In the last month, we've seen many back on the market.
Oh, okay.
Price changes.
Oh, wow.
And new listings.
Yeah.
And across the board, whether they're bank owns or just traditional, I think people are now understanding that maybe it isn't better to wait and they should marry the house and date the rate, because there is hopes coming soon with that. And we're seeing a little bit of a shift, and the market has been so volatile that literally it's like from 2 weeks to 2 weeks, it can be completely different.
Yeah.
Right. So that is positive. And we certainly anticipate that with the interest rates dropping, which we hope and have been told that they will drop twice before the new year and bring them closer to where they need to be, people will start to put their houses on the market. Right.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
And there'll be more inventory. And so I'm hoping that, because I think this is just going to also ease the blow, to your point, on that extra 2 points and allow us to negotiate.
Yeah.
Where in 3 weeks ago, good luck with that.
Yeah.
If you weren't $30,000-$40,000 over, asked, you weren't getting anywhere near the game of getting this deal for your clients. So I'm very, very hopeful that that's how things will unfold in the next few months, and that's what we're going to see. And then as this whole thing starts to play out and we start to implement this, one of the things I tell my team is, you got to understand, a lot of these first-time homebuyers are young couples, young professionals that have now finished grad school or have saved enough, whatever that is. So there's going to be an element that they're going to have to hear that at the barbecue, right? Because they're going to be at their parents for something with their cousin, and they're going to be taught, did you hear that now I have to pay this 2%, like my agent? Sure. And then somebody else is going to be like, oh, yeah, that's in, so there's going to be a part of that has to go around. And that's like that education, so that when you meet with these buyers, they don't feel that what is she talking about? This lady trying to scam me 2%, because at the beginning, there's going to be a lot of, hesitation. What do you mean I have to sign a contract that I got to pay you 2%? So to that, also, we've come up with forms that are a single property and then an exclusive relationship with them, which will be over a term.
Okay.
So we have come up with different solutions for that as well.
So people have different options when they're meeting with an agent as far as what they can agree to sign.
Because if it's one house, you'll have a customer that'll call me and say, I want to see that, and we'll go through our thing, and then they'll say, no, I only want to see that house. So listen, they're not going to go into this whole, relationship with you in a contract, but there's a form that will address that need, and we're identifying those issues as we go along.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for coming on.
Well, thank you.
Is there anything you want to just leave us with before we go?
No, certainly that, this too shall pass, and every industry goes through shakeups, and, wherever there is great uncertainty, there's also great opportunity.
Yeah.
So we certainly just have to stay educated and make sure that we know what's the real information and not really go by all the fake information out there. So, that's why this is great. So we can give the people the right information, and stay tuned. This will be a growing pain for our industry, but I'm sure that we will, get through this just
Yeah,
fine.
definitely.
Yeah. All
Awesome.
right. All
Well,
right.
thanks, Rachel. And, uh, again, for the listeners, if you have a listener question, you can always go to retirewithryan.com to leave your listener question. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode and look forward to talking to you next Wednesday. Take care.